transformation series. My name is Alex Abbott, fondly known as the Bearded Sales Guy. Again, we are at Grenville Turner Studios. Thank you so much, guys, for giving us this lovely space in the studio. I'm also joined by my lovely co-host, Dr. Grant Van Ulbrich.
I'm the other bearded guy, so it's nice to be here with you. I am in sales, so it's great to be here with you again. And yes, thanks to Grenville and Cranfield for allowing us to be here. This is a great platform, and we're happy to bring in great guests from all around the world to talk about sales transformation. I think that's why we're here as well today. We're going to continue the discussion, right?
It certainly is, with Mr. John Nicholson, MD at Royal Mail and Parcel Force. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Distinctly unbearded. I feel I feel like I didn't get the memo, so apologies for that.
Yeah, next time.
Next time.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a special guest joining us from afar. Somebody that we know. Is that right? Who is our guest today?
Well, our guest today is someone that you'll already know from a previous episode, Axel Ferreyrolles.
Hey, Axel, good to have you back.
Bonjour, messieurs. How are you
Bonjour.
doing?
Bonjour,
Good to be on the show.
Oh, good. Great to have you back. Well, today I think we're talking about leadership. In sales transformation, focusing on the differences of leadership and where do you start from and how do you lead sales transformation for yourself. But in order to do that, I think we need to set a tone with our guests about the foundations of leadership, right?
Yeah.
Now, I know that you both are seasoned leaders with your organizations, but for our audience, how do we define, leadership? When starting at that basis, you've got transactional leadership, which is over here on your left-hand side, and then you have transformational leadership over on the right. Now, transactional leadership is a mode of tell. It starts from, I'm going to tell you what to do, I have the experience, I know how to do this, and I'm going to work with my teams and just tell, right? But also you'll often find people that live in that frame of mindset, they will often take the credit for the process as well too. So they work with their teams, and then to the leadership, when it comes to sharing the successes of their team members, it's about them. They're the leaders. They're the ones that did that. Mm-hmm. And that may sound harsh, but I ask you to truly reflect on your own leadership style. Yeah. Because the opposite is harder. It is often much harder, and that's called transformational leadership. And I know both of my leaders here understand that because they're great examples of that, and we'll get into that. But transformational leadership in itself, that is all about your team members. And that's about the people that you lead. It's not about you, but it's about you setting the vision and the direction for where the brand and your company and your organization needs to go. And then saying, right, how do I develop these people? How do I foster these people, empower them? And how do I lead them through coaching and through a relationships building status so that I'm lifting them up? And often you will see transformational leaders have no problem and actually will champion the praise to go on their employees more than themselves.
So how different will it be if you have a team full of transactional leaders versus transformational leaders? How different will that transformation be?
Sometimes it can be toxic. To points, if you have too many transactional leaders, everybody wants to tell and everybody wants to take the lead in it. Someone's got to be the chief visionary at some point. And so what we like to do is if you have that foundation understanding of leadership, transactional versus transformational, you have to understand that you need to be able to shift in between them. There are some points where you, as the person who's in charge, needs to set the tone and direction and tell, but then how do you get out of that? Yeah. How do you then shift over into transformation? So it's about creating that development. Yeah. And that's what I would really love to talk about with our leaders that are here today. So again, as we've said, John is with Royal Mail and Parcel Force, and he just got a new promotion, taking on some new areas. And maybe you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. So, as you say, I've been running the sales teams or parts of the sales teams for a good while at Royal Mail and Parcel Force. That role has expanded now, so responsible for our customer experience teams, our marketing teams, and our digital function, which is our web and our app. With the very view that we bring all of those big customer-facing touch points together under arguably a leadership vision and a leadership view. Yeah. All of those departments working very, very well, but a little bit in isolation. So doing exactly what they needed to do, but slightly out of line with the other parts of the organisation.
And that was something that's very interesting and unique as well too. Something I learned that I didn't know. The Royal Mail is not just the post office itself. There are so many different divisions and branches. It's really large, isn't it?
Well, Royal Mail isn't the post office at all, which is obviously an important misconception. And we've spoken about this before on this channel, Alex, haven't we? You understand why people think we're the same organisation, of course, but the post office is a retail branch. Royal Mail is a private organisation. And the post office sells Royal Mail services to members of the public, of course. But from a sales point of view, of course, Royal Mail clearly services hundreds of thousands of businesses across the UK and indeed across the globe for the delivery of parcels and letters and so on.
Yeah. Well, before we get into your story, and I can't wait, we also have Axel Ferreyrolles, who is with SAP, and Axel leads sales transformation for SAP as well too. So Axel, do you want to tell a little bit about what you do there?
Happy to. So as you might know, SAP is in the IT business. So fast changes currently, especially with AI. My role is to help sales transform, leveraging the new technology, taking into account the latest change in the marketplace, and of course, taking into account the needs of our customers. I'm looking at innovation and transformation within the context of sales enablement. So my role is to find the best way for the salespeople to become efficient and effective in that fast-changing environment.
Very good. And that's no small feat.
No.
SAP is not a small organization either. So I applaud both of you on the jobs that you're doing, which is why you're in the roles you are. So shall we talk a little bit more about the leadership side of it? You know, you're both leading sales, you're both leading transformative sales, trying to take organizations to a new level. Where do you start from and how do you do that within the leadership frame?
So I thought we were going to go to Axel.
No, right for you right now.
So where do you start? You can start from a number of points, Grant, can't you? For me, it's starting about actually what are we trying to achieve as an organisation. We, like all organisations, are incredibly customer-led, but we're also a legacy organisation and we're a regulated organisation. You have to provide a base level of service, but we're in a competitive environment as well. What are we trying to achieve? The reality is, in many ways, that question's quite easy to answer. We want to achieve excellent service, but what type of service? What's the differentiators for us as an organisation against some of our competitors who are relatively new to the space, for example? Beyond that, it's about what capabilities exist already within the organisation. So,
you mean within your talent?
Within the talent, within the teams, within the heads of people. So we're really, really fortunate at Royal Mail. We have very long tenure. So people start, and it is, as was the traditional job for life for an awful lot of people. That's absolutely brilliant because what you've got is an awful lot of experience. What you've then also got, if you want to fundamentally change, is a lot of inertia. And actually, what do we need to do to bring people along that change? Let's assume for a moment that people are up for that change, and we know, Grant, that change isn't particularly easy. But on the assumption that people are up for it, they've still got to do it. So we need to understand what potential, where we're going, what we're trying to achieve. Need to understand what is within the talent, the people that we already have, but understanding the scale of that change, that transformation. And then, of course, there's the very practical element of we're trying to run a business and make some money. So what are the timescales by which we've got? Because particularly in the sales environment, we're all quite used to working to relatively short timescales. That might be a quarter, it might be a year, it might be 2 years, depending on what part in the sales world you're playing in. But they're still relatively short, aren't they? And I think when we talk about transformational, it tends to make you think about the longer term change. So can the business that you're working for sustain that period of time? So we've got to understand that as well. What are the short term bits that might get in the way of transformational change?
You talked about the goals. In sales, I can't help but think that the goal is always linked to revenue. But is that actually a healthy goal to have when we're talking about transformation?
Well, it's the thing. Arguably, it's the thing that most organisations will live and die by. Well, profit, the thing that most organisations will live and die by. But that is an important point, isn't it? Is what is the cost to serve? you know, depending on what your organisational goals are, and do you have the right mix of resources and reward schemes and people to be able to deliver that revenue. It's very easy, isn't it? But the vast majority of salespeople have got a number on their head and it's quite binary. You deliver that, brilliant, you've paid for yourself, or you over deliver, well done. That's very, very good. You've still got to allow for a big degree of underperformance as well.
But you know what? It's interesting. You know, you talk about that, and you're so right. Most organizations focus on, well, what pays our bills, right? And that's the revenue generation. And that is probably one of the biggest key factors and key elements in driving your business strategy, as it probably should be. But you know, it's something interesting. You know, I found a fact just the other day that in 2023, the impact to global economy, and this is expense side, for quiet quitting was 9 trillion. 9 trillion. And that's not a long time ago. That was just last year.
And when you say quiet quitting for our viewers...
Quiet quitting, so that involves attrition, heavy attrition, loss of employees, losing out on people's participation. So quiet quitting doesn't happen just instantly in people resigning. It is about their productivity, their contribution. So you're absolutely right to talk about, as a leader, you know, what do we have within the skill sets? But then also, how are we inclusively inviting them to participate in the mission of the company? You know, because we should be measured on the people that we keep in longevity, promote up, you know, our sustainabilities as well too as leaders. And how do you measure that attrition, you know, and unnecessary loss? 9 trillion's a lot.
It is a lot. And actually, it just triggered a thought really is, all organisations, I think, to a degree, rely on discretionary effort. I think we've all, as organisations, forget as people, as organisations, we've probably got quite used to that, haven't we? People going over and above, and a good proportion of our people will always go over and above. They stop doing that. It's very difficult to quantify because they're doing it arguably off their own back.
So you're both at large organisations, Royal Mail, Parcel Force, SAP, and transformation. As we're talking about this idea of transformation, and there being so many transformations within a transformation, how do you keep the leadership team and the organisation aligned on that goal and working towards achieving that goal and motivated towards achieving that goal?
Alex, do you want to take that one?
Axel?
Start us off. Axel, sorry, I do that all the time. I get both my guys mixed up.
No worries, Trent. It's a key question, and it's not an easy one to respond. I guess the first thing starts with our vision and our mission statement. Now, at SAP, we want to help the world run better and improve people's life using technology. When I listen to John, and I fully agree that, you know, transformation includes a longer time frame. And when we reflect about that notion of making money, I don't believe that companies are designed to make money. Companies are here to solve a problem or create potential, which by default, as a secondary impact, will generate money if you do the right thing. Now, from our perspective, what the leadership keeps in mind is that we are here to help our customers grow and thrive in a digital world. Each company and every company becomes IT companies since the COVID. And this was a huge transformation in the marketplace. And of course, from our point of view, we want to help any and every company to actually take the best of their IT infrastructure and our software in order to grow into something else, to drive new potential. And what we want, what we drive, and the entire transformation comes from that vision, that we want the companies to thrive and to become what they want to become, using technology and our software. Now, once you have that in mind, then you can start streamlining, obviously, your process, the way you operate your bonus plan, because bonus plan will drive behaviors at a sales level to a certain extent, but only to a certain extent, and more importantly, the values. And I'm sure we're going to talk about values at some point.
The other point, again, it triggers another thought, is this notion that transformation has an end point. And we talk about goals, don't we, and say this is what we want to achieve. And if it is over a longer time scale, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, well, clearly the world isn't going to be the same in 10 years. So I think one of the things we've tried to land through some of the sales-led projects at Royal Mail is this notion of it's continual iterative change. The transformation is directional, and here's what it is at this moment in time. But let's acknowledge it's going to adapt. It's going to shift.
Is this where I imagine this North Star, and for me, in as we all are in sales, in B2B sales, this notion of trust and always working towards this North Star of developing trust between the organization and their customers. And then all of the other projects, the transformational projects, are aligned to that North Star. Therefore, to your point, John, you've got this never-ending evolution of change, because you're always trying to strengthen something that is kind of getting, it's never fully touched. There's always improvement.
Interesting. Can we take this a little deeper? Do you mind if I push this with my gentleman here? Because this North Star, I want to focus this North Star on you, Axel, and you, John, because the subject of today is to talk about leadership, right? And you brought up a very good point. Actually, we might have to bring you back for episode 6 on, are you done? That's what episode 6 is going to be about, is now that you've transformed, are you there yet? And are you finished? And I don't think we have an indication that the answer is no. It needs to be continual evolution. But when we focus on today's subject of leadership and saying, so John and Axel, your own North Star, that trust, right? How do you do it? Because you're both leading hundreds of people, at different locations, remotely, etc. What is your leadership style, and how do you do it? The pressure's on.
Yeah,
right?
the pressure's on now. Thanks,
No
Grant.
pressure, John.
Well, trust is internal and external. It's everywhere.
Yeah, trust is internal and external. Look, so it's a cliche to use in leadership terms, but I genuinely, there's a degree of authenticity. And for me, on behalf of the company, so I want to work for an organisation, Royal Mail Parcel Force, but whatever the organisation that's genuinely trying to do the right thing. To your point, it's working towards trust. We are all trying to do a good job. And I think there's an intrinsic understanding of what is the right thing to do. Now, as leaders, particularly senior leaders, we've got to make those trade-offs sometimes between a thing you'd absolutely love to land and you can't because budget, time restraint, environmental, whatever it might be. Sometimes there is just things that you have to get comfortable with that you can't do. What I hope to achieve in my leadership style is by explaining that as much as possible, because there's sometimes a big myth around leadership, isn't it? And particularly in large organisations, they are full of rumours and conjecture and mistruths and myths about what's going on. And actually, if you try and demystify some of that, so these are the conversations that we're having, and this is the reasons why, and these are some of the things we just can't do. But by the way, here's all the things we're trying to do, and this is what we're trying to work towards, and what we're trying to achieve. I find that helps. I suppose one of the learnings for me over my career, though, is you have to get comfortable with the fact, particularly in large teams, that there will be a subset of those people that are looking at you going, "You're an idiot. You do not know what you're talking about."
That never happens, does it?
And they will fundamentally disagree with my personal North Star, if you like, because it's from a different perspective. So you've got to get comfortable with that.
But then do you invite that with your team members? Do you invite conversation and collaboration? Challenge me if you think I'm wrong.
I certainly hope to, but we also have to acknowledge if you've got a silly job title, which many of us do, that does bring with it a seniority where people don't necessarily talk to you in the same way they would, like we are today, or in a pub. So you've got to get that balance right. So I try and invite the challenge, and there is definitely lots and lots of people within the teams, the wider teams, that will take that challenge up, and I love it because that's where you get a huge piece of feedback. But there's definitely a lot more people who just wait.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a conversation we had with Axel last time on the previous show about co-creation and the importance of helping the leadership really feel like they're creating the North Star, the strategy, the transformation together. But then you're both in large organisations with multiple layers of leadership. How do you manage that from the top down? Or do you?
or does your direction come from the top and that's how you're supposed to just execute?
Well, there's bits about, and arguably that's the difference between transformational and transactional leadership, isn't it? There will be, I'm not the CEO of Royal Mail and Parcel Force or IDS. We will get a direction, of course we will. But but your interpretation of that direction and your deployment of that, there's room to do the things that we want to do. It's still ultimately my role to come up with the methodology by which we're going to achieve the big goals in it. So that you have to hope that there's enough accountability within the leaders. You've got to continue to develop your leaders. I think middle management, regardless of whether it's sales or anything, is particularly difficult because you've got all of that upward pressure from your front line or operational teams or whatever. You are soaking up a lot of challenges, and you've got all of the downward pressure from more senior management who are arguably setting a direction, be it transformational or transactional or otherwise. That middle management layer is absolutely critical because they are the translators of that in so many cases. They're the ones right at the sharp end.
So I believe we should have transformational leadership running through the organization, even, and we've talked about this before, Grant, even the reps on the ground, if they're behaving like a transformational leader themselves, even though they're not in a leadership position, it helps lift the organization and those around them. But how practical is that to consider your entire organization as a transformational, truly transformational?
Well, let me touch on that for just a second, and then I want to ask Alex.
Axel.
Or Axel. I do that all the time, guys. Yeah. This is what happens when you get a little older.
We need a jar like a...
The A gentleman. In my doctoral research, it was one of the things that I kept coming up against is who can practice transformational leadership? Who can? And in the literature that's out there worldwide, it is heavily documented that it is the top echelon of leadership that typically you will find that experiences a transformational leadership poise. And that's the CEO, that's the senior vice presidents, the COO, the board, etc. But I actually felt that really truly is not factually correct because there are tons of people, and you've articulated it very well, the middle management. And if you look at the middle management who are typically the heart of the sales enterprise, we as leadership should provide the direction and the viewpoint, and our guide is supposed to help them get along the way to achieve the results. But who's going to execute that? And so often you will find these stars within the middle management who are practicing, they might not know about it, but they're practicing transformational leadership by leading up. You've all heard that before, managing up and leading up. Well, it's hard to do. And that's why transformational leadership is. And in my thesis and in my practication, I was able to prove that is a myth. That is busted. You can practice transformational leadership if you learn it. And it is a learnable skill. So I go over to Axel. Axel, you are a sales transformation leader in a major organization. You're not the CEO. You're not the board chairman. You're not the board. How do you lead that and how do you drive that from where you sit?
I mean, listening to all of you gentlemen, lots of thoughts coming to my mind. So the first thing I would like to refocus is that everyone is a leader. It's not because you have a team that you're a leader. As an expert, and in SAP we have lots of experts, single contributors, you need to see yourself as a leader, right? And you can decide which direction, which vision you want to follow, especially when you're in contact with the customers. The way you as a salesperson engage with the customer, the quality of the relationship, the authenticity that John was referring to is something that you choose to exhibit or not. So when I think leadership, first I think about everyone. And that is important from a mindset perspective. So what I do as a transformational leader is first to see in people their potential, right? Unlimited potential. Second, I see leaders in them. From that standpoint, then, what I try to do is to create space. The problem we have in sales is the pressurized environment that, again, John, you were referring to, between the board pressure and the market bottom-up pressure. The problem we have, and that's part of my research as well, is how do you do transformative training? I am in enablement. How do I enable transformation through my training and enablement? You can only do it if you create a space where there is psychological safety, where there is enough quality for reflection, and where people, in that case salespeople, can actually step back from their day-to-day activities. You cannot achieve transformation without reflection.
Yeah.
That's an important statement for me. So whatever I do in anything I drive, I start first to think about how do I create the space for people for them to start the transformation. Because in the day-to-day transaction craziness, you will not achieve it. So how do you do it?
It's a really important point, isn't it? And that reflection. I think there's something about accountability at all levels. Like you say, everyone's a leader without the title, and particularly in sales where you do have individual contributors, they are out there on their own an awful lot of the time. They're not necessarily, but a lot of people don't want to take on that accountability either, and so maybe don't realise actually quite the power that their voice has. Mm-hmm. We've experienced it in Royal Mail sales specifically. So through our trust scores, which is really interesting, the lowest score we always have is that people feel involved in the decisions that affect them,
right,
from their perspective.
Yeah.
Yet I'm sitting from my perspective saying, you've told us this is what you want through, through the surveys or through our engagement or through our projects and so on. So I'm thinking, this is all of your vision, and you're thinking, I've had nothing to do with this. Yeah. Which is a really challenging dichotomy. Actually.
Well, it's interesting you say that as well too. Do people, they don't want that challenge, but I also, and I've talked about this at great length. Do they even know how? Mm. That is a personal change that's happening to people, and responses from leaders, responses from the business direction, responses from the customers. You both are so spot on, and even in my running of sales teams and sales transformation itself, this is why I built Scared So What, right in the middle of that. Yeah. So how am I supposed to lead the transformation if we're not including the individual in the journey? Yeah. And to your point, mostly, since we haven't been taught how to manage change for ourselves, we find that we are stuck in it's easier for me to say no. It's easier for me to not volunteer. It's easier for me to not participate. And if you could teach your teams how to manage that process to make it inclusive for them, you'll find that you get a different outcome.
Yeah, so here's a question for you, for all three of you, but let's start with you, Grant.
Okay.
Can transformation actually happen if you have a team of transactional leaders?
It can. It's going to be rough. It's going to be slow. It's going to be pulled. But it depends on you. If you have a team of transactional leaders all in a system of TEL, then it depends on what type of process you're trying to lead. Mm. If the project that you're moving is just merely we need to get A to B, fine, transactional can work. Yeah. But if it is a process of inclusion of customers' wants, needs, sales processes, and involvement, then somebody needs to lead a little bit more inclusively. Mm. That's also if you have the mindset of I'm not worried about my people, or I'm not worried about developing them or retaining them. Yeah. Then live in transactional. Yeah. But if you on the bus or off the bus? If you care about, and I speak a lot with senior leaders who are worried about their careers, and maybe not worried is the right, they are aspirational in their directions of where they want to go. And if you want to be at the top levels in leading whatever organization or entity you're doing, could even be for yourself, there has to be a point to where you're going to ask yourself, or your board or your leaders are going to ask, how do you develop your people? Mm. That's not from transactional. So I want to take this back to Axel and to John. Yeah. Transformational leadership includes one major tool, and we haven't talked about it today, and I haven't heard the word, but the word is coaching. Mm. And because that's where you stop your TEL and you get into the development side of it. So to my gentlemen guests, I ask each of you two questions. Number one, what is your view on what is coaching? And number two, do you apply it? John.
You're asking me first again?
I'm asking you first because you're right here.
So,
the hot spot when you're here.
So, what was the first one?
What is your understanding of coaching?
So, for me, coaching, we're going to talk about this in another subject, aren't we? We've got another context. But for me, coaching fundamentally changed my career in two ways. So one was actually working with some great coaches who just forced me to think differently and so on. The second was when I actually did my coaching qualifications. And it enabled me to coach and mentor in a much more structured way. Yeah. but it made me a better coachee. So all of a sudden, I got more out of the coaching because I understood the game.
Yeah.
And
you knew what was in it for you.
I knew what was in it for me, and I understood what I needed to do to be the better coachee. And so it's a slight digression. So do I apply it? I believe I do. But and this is something we've changed at Royal Mail, is we've just introduced a team of specific coaches. Because, and it might be unpopular in this context or in this conversation, there is still a place for transactional leadership. As you say, if you're moving a project from A to B, we work in some metric environments and so on. And like I say, there is a reality that some of that needs to exist.
Yeah.
And there is a reality that some people will respond better to a tell than they will a coaching environment.
But are you talking about situational leadership, where the leader switches from one mode to the next?
Well, and flexing.
Well, yes.
Leadership flexing for yourself, for your people that you're working with.
Absolutely. But I think what I've recognised and what we've recognised in Royal Mail, which is why we've built this, is I believe, and this is new for us, I believe there's a benefit to having a focus on coaching, which will allow the managers to manage. Because we've trained virtually all of our, I'll call them middle managers. In Royal Mail, that means something slightly different, but for this purposes, middle managers, our sales managers, our contact centre managers. The very vast majority of them are at least a level 5 qualified coach. But we still ask them to manage, manage the metrics, manage the KPIs. And so some of them will have a natural ability or tendency towards coaching and so on, and all of the variations that make up our leadership styles. What I wanted to create was an environment where, the individuals will know they've got these teams of coaches that they can call upon without fear of being managed.
Yeah. What's your forecast? What deals are you going to close?
Yeah.
How can I help?
Exactly that, because the manager will, ultimately still does have this conflict between hitting those deals, getting the best out of the team, financially, metrics-wise, and so on. So do I apply it? Look, will I apply it in all situations, regardless of the fact I'm qualified as a coach? No. I coach and mentor, outside of the line and external, and it's one of the things I get the most value out of, where I actually get to practice being a coach in a true sense of the word, and I absolutely love it. And I wish I could apply it all of the time in all of my interactions in the day job.
I'm so sorry, but I'm glad he said that, because it's a key benefit to your overall health, your wellness as a leader. He said it brilliantly. I couldn't have paid you to say that better, because you are happier when you're actually inspiring and leading others and developing them in the story. So thanks for saying that. That's great.
It's true. I mean, it's true for me. I guess it's true for a lot of people. A lot of people don't choose to get into leadership, right? But once you're there, your job is the people.
That's so true. Yeah. Axel, what about you? What's your view? So what is your understanding of coaching, and do you apply it?
So for me, coaching has to do with helping others achieve their full potential through finding their own ways and their own answers. It's not that we impose answers on them, it's that they find their own answers. Now, does that take a bit more time than mentoring and telling? Probably yes. Can it go fast? Yes. And the more effective you become, the more effective your session become, the more effective, people will. By the way, by doing one session and a second session of coaching, you will see that the process of coaching is getting faster and faster and getting more and more easy to process. Because that's one of the barriers we see when we talk to frontline sales managers. They believe that coaching takes more time than mentoring. But the problem of mentoring is that the person comes back to you all the time for more answers and suggestions. Well, when you ask, listen, next time you come to me, please think first before asking for my answers. Think for yourself, and they're going to ask you questions. When they come prepared that you will coach them, you will see that the process is getting faster, more fluid, and they will get much more out of it. So helping them find the solution is number one. Now, the second thing, which I think is important, we are using the word transactional leadership and transactional leaders and transformational leaders. As a coach myself, I tend to avoid putting stickers and labels on people. I guess we can say we have leaders who applies transactional behaviors, and we have leaders who wants to apply transformational behaviors.
Yes.
It's a continuum, and it's good, as John said, to be able to be agile, to be flexible, and move from one to the other. And What I try to do is to use coaching as much as I can, but because I'm also an expert in certain areas, sometimes I have the tendency to say, listen, we have good practices, this is where we go. The problem of good practice is that the good practice is based on the past. It's like AI, right? It's something that comes from the past, from a past experience in the past time. The beauty of coaching is that the coaching takes the information from today, based on the person in front of you, in the state the person is at that moment, within the environment of that moment. So it can only create new things. Okay. So coaching creates the new, mentoring is based on the past. So it repeats the old. And I guess that in the VUCA world that we are, so volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, we need the new. The co-creation, the development, the thriving will come from that coaching because we need to create the new. We cannot stay in the old.
Love that.
It's not good enough.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I find, actually, I don't know if you find this, I find that people will approach me to coach them, which is great and very nice and, real privilege. But actually what they're asking for is mentoring. And so when you take the time to explain the difference, and quite often if I'm taking on a new coachee or mentee that's outside the line, I will go through that process to say, here's the difference, what do you want out of this relationship? Because it's two very different approaches.
Love that.
Yeah.
Now that's a lot easier to do though when you're not in the throes of day-to-day leadership. So I'm talking about when you are taking on a coachee or a mentee specifically, rather than just managing or leading your team.
Yeah.
And would you approach that differently if they were inside your own organisation versus outside your organisation?
If they were inside Royal Mail but not in the sales line, then I would approach it as if it's an external person. But still within the sales line, it's still what you want, because what I try to be quite clear on is saying if we're going to enter into a coaching relationship and you're in the sales line, this isn't a green light or a fast path towards promotion because we've sat together and we've got a better relationship. You've still got to do the work.
Yeah.
And that's the point. And it's making that clear up front, I think, is really important. Then there's no ambiguity, is there?
Yeah.
I had two things that came from that that were interesting. I just wrote them down, internal and external. And I also focus on so many leaders. When you say the words coaching, you almost get an allergic reaction sometimes. Have you seen that as well too? You might be feeling that, coaching, that takes just too much time. But it really truly is about how it can benefit you. And we as leaders often fail to understand that, right? How coaching can benefit me. So you think of your email inbox. You think of your direction from your supervisors up above. You think of your plans, the strategies that you need to impose, and the people you need to lead. If you are having to tell each person, then you're not fostering the development, and you're just queuing up people to keep coming back to you, to keep responding to emails, to keep more calls, etc. But when you truly start to shift, because we all have those employees, right? Tell me if I'm wrong. We all have those employees that'll come up, hey Grant, I wanted to show you that this and this, look, my plate is full. It's really full and I'm super, super busy. Do you think this is okay? You could very easily say yes and move forward, and you're not going to break that cycle. But you could say, do you want me to coach you, to your point, or would you like me to tell you? Interesting. What you've just done is you've signaled, I value you, that I can tell you or I can help you to grow. And if you take that moment to help them to grow, guess what? You're empowering them, and they know that the next time they come to you, that you are going to challenge them.
Yeah, I can't help but think of, because not everybody knows what they want.
Sure.
It's like, just tell me. Well, actually, no, to help you grow, I need to coach you. And it kind of reminds me of a famous quote from Henry Ford. If I'd have asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Faster horses, yeah.
But I cast my mind back many years ago, where I would have a leader coach me, and it would be frustrating because I just wanted to be told the answer. But actually there was something happening in my mind over a longer period of time that then taught me to think for myself and kind of brainstorm ways forward.
So true, so true.
As a result of the coaching and going through the kind of the tough times of, well, just tell me. And I'd be asked a question, I'd be like, I don't know the answer.
That's true.
I just don't know the answer. Just tell me.
But as John said, we have to decide, we have to be able to flex our style so that some people we need to tell, and sometimes we need to tell.
Yeah.
But how do we get out of that so that we are fostering growth? And so then to both of your points of what you both rightly said, how do we flex in between? Something that came up in the conversation just a while ago, internal and external.
Yeah.
In our leadership pose, in our styles of leadership, you guys are leading sales entities, but we also lead good relationships B2B, and all four of us are in that element. How do you embed leadership into your sales team with their customers? And is coaching a methodology that's used by your salespeople for their customers? John?
So
Loaded quick. Look at his face. Loaded quick.
There's a bit to unpick there. I don't know if this quite answers your question, Grant, but one of the things that I am, on occasion, I get asked to come and see a customer with the salesperson at various levels. It might be a large customer, It could be small, and it's lovely, it's a real privilege. But the one thing that I am always very keen not to do is then dominate that meeting or that session, because
Happy about you.
Well, absolutely, because I just want to find out about the customer. B, of course, I've got one eye on wanting to see how the salesperson's doing and what their relationship's like as well, because you don't often get to see it in reality, not in an unfiltered way. And then all of a sudden, you become the relationship owner for that customer, which may or may not be good.
And you wipe out your salesperson.
And you wipe out your salesperson.
Yeah.
And so there's no real good outcomes out of that. So there is a bit about coaching, and again, it's set in that, which is I want to, go through that and pick up some of the feedback afterwards, and talk about how the call, how the meeting went, how did the pitch go. But I do like the pre-coaching, which arguably I say pre-coaching. Let's be honest, it's probably sales management 101. What are we going there for? What are the objectives? What are we talking about? Let's have a look at your pitch or whatever it might be.
Getting them to think, are they planning strategically,
Absolutely, which arguably is all coaching.
Yeah. It's true. But Axel, let's take it a little further. So let's focus on key account management. So account management, business development. We all have those types of salespeople. Would we agree? Yeah. Yes. They represent our businesses. They go out and they are either managing accounts. So I'm their supervisor. My leadership style hopefully will inspire them, motivate them, and drive them. But as they are autonomous in their role and responsibility going out to meet and represent our brands to the B2B, right? How do we then impose upon them their leadership style and their ability? Because far often than not, did you realize that your account managers and business development leaders, they are coaches to the sales customer. They are they're leading your brand to be sold to those customers. And that is a relationship far often that is transactional only. And if we're not smart and wise and conscious of this, we can have an army of B2B account management salespeople that are going out there. Hi, my name is Bob, and this is my product that I sell, and you should be buying it. And my KPIs are X, right? Versus how are they lead? You laugh, but it's true. How many of them are leading? And how many of them saying, you know what, my role as account manager is to help you achieve your vision, help you to achieve your KPIs. And when we do that, hopefully successfully, my product has helped you to achieve that. Yeah. So my question to you, Axel, is how far does your leadership extend with your salespeople to your customer?
And I was laughing because you did it so well, Grant, on the transactional salesperson. Thank you. Okay. I guess on this one, I need to go back to skills. I'm a professional trainer, and we are focusing on skills and upskilling. And lots of our salespeople need to be upskilled. Now, we don't train them on coaching specifically, but when you look at some of the sales methodology, an old one from the 90s, beginning of the year 2000, called SPIN. When you use SPIN is a technique that has been used to ask powerful questions with the situation, the problem, the impact, and the way forward. So this powerful question, funnily enough, when I did my coaching, I realized that this is a model we use for life coaching, right? Or performance coaching. So by training your sales team on SPIN, you start getting them into a coaching mindset, because you don't want them to be coaches. You want them to have a coaching mindset. Now, using SPIN, and powerful questions will get them into that coaching mindset. So that's the first thing we do. The second one is, of course, strategic thinking, what we train people on, especially at the account management level. So account directors, account executive, managing partners, they all have lots of training on strategic thinking and holistic thinking. When you start going on strategic and holistic thinking, by default, you're going to have to ask questions because you know you don't know. When you start with, I know I don't know, then you're going to start asking questions. By asking questions, you help the customer itself to think beyond the known into the unknown. And that's what we do. So I guess with powerful questions on the one hand, strategic thinking and holistic thinking on the second, you start getting them into more of what I call a coaching mindset.
And I think back to what you were saying earlier, Grant, I was thinking this is cultural. This is like this needs to be a cultural shift within an organization to raise the bar.
Yeah.
Otherwise, how do you effectively raise the bar? And what do you measure? How do you say, oh, our leaders are now transformational?
I think you're absolutely right. It has to be a culture shift. And John's looking at me. He's like, what are you going to say, Doc? But if you think about it, two perspectives. I'm just kind of still reminiscing on Axel's conversation just a while ago, because what would the harm be in teaching your sales force coaching? And think about this for a moment. I actually do this within my organization. What we do is we do transparency in our leadership, to authenticity, and we introduce that we're going to teach our leaders and our managers who supervise people coaching. But in doing that, we're also going to teach all the recipients and the benefactors of coaching what it is as well too, so that you have a holistic view of why it's important. And I think you touched on that earlier in the conversation.
But this is where I have a bit of a problem, because all of this change it has to be anchored against ROI. And I love what you're saying.
Time and management, it doesn't take long to do it. So,
right.
And again, this is a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. So are you in your job for 5 minutes, or are you in your job for a long time vision to impact change and transformation?
Yeah.
If your role is leading sales transformation, it is to shift away from the 1980s consultative tips, tricks, manipulation, etc., to transform and meet today's consumer.
Yep.
It doesn't take long.
Yeah.
And that's a misconception. People think that takes a whole lot of time.
Now, a lot of my B2B sales career has been in tech, like Axel's. And there is no time at the moment. There are hundreds of thousands of redundancies. So how, I know you are both not from the tech side of things, so you'll have a different perspective, perhaps. Yeah. But how does one consider we have the fact that we have time to do this transformation? And how is that, do you think, affecting the decisions that they're able to make? Because there's that time pressure on them that is external, maybe internal with internal redundancies, but external in terms of the industry shifts.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I'm conscious we might time out because we'll go into another world. I've said this a couple of times publicly, not coming from the tech world, right? So I understand, and people like Axel, yourself, are much more familiar with this. As someone who gets sold to quite often, and as someone who studies sales and sales techniques and what we should be doing for the future, I am seeing virtually everything appears to be built on a SaaS model. Which does two things. As a buyer, you can just see it. You can see it, and it becomes a bit contrived and a bit.
When do you want a demo, John?
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that, and so on. But the other thing is, it just doesn't work in all industries. It doesn't particularly work. You spoke about account management and so on. So those definitions are becoming very anchored to a SaaS model, and I think that's overall maybe harming the non-tech sales industry at the moment, because I think there's a voice that's missing in that.
That's a good point.
I actually agree. But I do see the opportunity in both, because with typical leadership and the allergicness to coaching with time management that people typically feel, You see that so much in the change management rejection side of, I don't have time to do it. But in actuality, if you understood it, you would find that you can do it in everyday conversation. It doesn't take, the science is actually proven. Gartner did a massive global study on, does coaching take more time to do versus general management? Because most people think that it does. And the answer of the study, global study, said no, it doesn't. It's how you use your time. And it's how you stop yourself from telling and actually replace it with a question so that you foster the development of the person in front of you.
Yeah.
So back to my point, and just quickly, I realize we'll run out of time. What's the harm in bringing your sales team in on the journey?
Yeah.
Because in business development and in account management and the farther reaching, your job is to help that account grow.
Yeah.
You're never going to be that type of a person to help them unless you do facilitate the questions. And they can't be scripted questions. They have to be genuine curiosity, because of the democracy we're living in.
Yeah. Indeed. And on that note, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Grant, John,
Thank you.
Axel. Wonderful.
And to our guest and to Cranfield and the Turner Studio that we're here today. Thanks for letting us be here. Axel, always great to have you back, and John as well in person.
What have we got next? What's
coming
episode
up
4?
Next. Our next episodes that we're going to continue on would be episode 4, which is how do you create the culture for transformative change and change that sticks? So John is going to be back with us, and we're also going to have another friend from SAP, Rainer Stern, is going to join us. So he'll join us from Germany, which we're very excited to have him.
Quick plug for the book.
Ah, yes, I forgot. We do have a new book that's coming out. And by the time this is out, April 26th, Transformational Sales Leadership, Sales Leader Perspectives. So 12 global sales leaders from around the world. We've each written a chapter, myself included, and Rainer, who will be with us. He wrote a chapter as well. So this is all from the Consalia Sales Business School. Great leadership, and it's publishing. You can get it on Amazon, and it's through Routledge. So hopefully you'll get that.
Brilliant. See you next time on Sales TV, Sales Transformation. Bye all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.